African history, nationalism in Ghana. Nationalism in Ghana. The Ghanaian nationalism or revolution refers to the tremendous changes registered by the nationals in Gold Coast in the struggle for independence. Ghana was a British colony and she was the first African country south of the Sahara to achieve independence on 6 March 1957. Nkrumah chose the name Ghana in memory of the ancient empire of Ghana. Political parties were formed early, such as United Gold Coast Convention formed in 1947, Convention People's Party, CPP in 1949, among others. Sample questions. 1. Account for the early independence of Ghana. 2. Examine the factors that facilitated the independence of Ghana. 3. Discuss the factors for the rise of nationalism in the Gold Coast. The factors for Ghana's early independence include the following. 1. The influence of the historical traditional resistances in Gold Coast led to the independence struggle. Following the British rule, masses in Gold Coast staged resistances against the poor tax. The Fund also pushed for the independence. Some people also resisted the British not to take away their traditional steel golden. All these inspired nationalistic sentiments, laying grounds for independence. 2. The homogeneous nature of the Gold Coast promoted national unity and promoted independence. The people had common history and culture they were proud of. Their origin, and the majority, i.e. 60%, was Akan speakers who had positive influence on other tribes like Ga, Yu, Kwame. This created a strong sense of nationalism due to absence of ethnic differences. 3. Gold Coast had a progressive and developed economic infrastructure. The road and railway systems were well developed. The harbours were also modern. The roads included the Akotema Road, the Kimosi Railway. These were built by the British to exploit resources, but the nationals used the roads to mobilize the masses for independence struggle. 4. African history, nationalism in Ghana. Dankwa and William Oforia, two among others. These were paid less compared to the whites, and it generated anger that made them to condemn colonialism. 6. The formation and rule of political parties contributed to the struggle of independence. These parties included UK and CPP, formed in 1947 and 1949, respectively. The parties were dominated by rich middle class who financed party activities. Nkrumah under CPP promoted political awareness by opening up party branches in the countryside. This sped up the rate of independence. 7. The impact of the 1948 riots in Gold Coast laid a firm ground for independence. The riots were staged by the ex-servicemen of World War II in Accra to present a list of grievances. The British police fired at the crowd and killed people, arrested other nationalists like Nkrumah, Dankwa, Akufo-Addo, etc. The arrest hardened the anti-colonial sentiments, leading to independence. 8. The impact of World War II was equally responsible for the independence struggle. Gold Coast had about 50,000 ex-servicemen who had returned home by 1946. The ex-servicemen had been frustrated by the retrenchment and unfulfilled promises. These had witnessed the independence of India in 1947 and got military and democratic principles to weaken British policies, leading to independence. 9. The influence of the swallow and shoot disease in Gold Coast aroused nationalism in Ghana. The disease attacked and destroyed cocoa trees at an alarming rate, but the colonial government ordered the cutting of cocoa trees without compensation. The Ghanaians interpreted this as a deliberate move to weaken over 65% of the peasants. This created a revolutionary mood for independence. 10. The small and manageable population of Ghana explains its early independence. Ghana is a very small country, and its population was very small, compact and controllable. By 1930s, it had 5 million people, and it was very easy to mobilize and organize for a national cause, which sped up the rate of nationalism and independence in 1957. 11. The role of Governor Burns also made Ghana attain her early independence. Burns, as the governor of Ghana, was very understanding, sympathetic, empathetic, cooperative and accommodative. He introduced constitutional changes in 1944/1946 that allowed African representation in Lekka, and in 1946 the Labour government in Britain ordered him to increase African representation in Lekka. These changes reduced the colonial oppression and gave the people of more bargaining power, forged for self-rule in 1957. 12. The positive role of Sir Arden Clark also helped Ghana to attain her independence. Arden became the governor of Ghana after the 1948 riots to bring peace in a country. He ordered for the release of Nkrumah from prison and worked closely with him. Nkrumah was made the leader of government, business prime minister in 1954, and this accelerated the rate of independence in Ghana. 13. The attainment of independence in Asia accelerated similar developments in Ghana. Several Asian states were decolonized at the end of World War I and II, e.g. India and African history. Nationalism in Ghana. Demonstrations were staged by Nkrumah, and this was a great boost in arousing self-rule. 14. Gold Coast had a strong network of the press and mass media, and this accelerated nationalism. A series of instruments of communication like the Gold Coast, Independence News 1945, Accra Evening News 1948, the Morning Telegraph and Daily Mail in 1949. These made political publications like Towards Colonial Freedom, Neo-Colonialism, The Last Stage of Colonialism. These were read by elites, and the evils of colonialism were exposed, hence early independence. 15. The influence of the Manchester Conference of 1945 contributed to Ghana's early independence. The conference was organized in the diaspora, but was attended by very many African nationalists, including Nkrumah as a co-secretary. The conference demanded for positive action against colonial rule, made Nkrumah to be exposed to international focused leadership skills. He became a true Democrat, and his ideology was shaped to form the CPP party with slogans like independence, now forward, ever backward, never. 16. The positive impact of UNO in 1945 accelerated the independence of Ghana. In 1956, the UN intervened and organized a referendum which saw the tribe in Togo joining Ghana, and this boosted the unity, added pressure and reinforced political parties to demand for self-rule in Ghana. 17. The charismatic leadership of Nkrumah led to early independence of Ghana. Nkrumah had exceptional skills, very visionary, had organizational ability, handsome, eloquent, and an orator. He returned from abroad in 1947 and became a powerful factor in demanding for self-rule. He accepted leadership in UNC. He won the support of workers, the unemployed, and became the Leninist Kaiser of Africa to dismantle colonial rule in Africa. 18. The impact of the National Congress of British West Africa and CBWA led to the struggle for independence. The Congress was founded in 1920 by a leading Ghanaian patriot, Joseph Hayford. The aim of the Congress was to decolonize the West African countries of Gambia, Gold Coast, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, etc. It demanded for equal representation of Africans in the legislature, stop the whites to select traditional rulers, separate power of judiciary from the political power of the governor. The Congress set up papers called the African Morning Post that published anti-colonial articles. These weakened the colonial arm of Britain by 1957. 19. The impact of the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya in 1952-55 threatened Britain to initiate reforms. The Labour Party in London learnt lessons from the Kenyan nationalism and devised means of granting political rights to Africans on the continent. The British government in London conditioned Governor Arden Clark to bring changes in Ghana to prevent the violent scenario similar to that of Kenya, and increased cooperation with Nkrumah. Reforms were made to allow political party activities. African history, nationalism in Ghana. The role/contribution of political parties towards independence. Struggle in Gold Coast. The United Gold Coast Convention, UC. The UC was formed in 1947 in August by a group of people like Sekondi, a prominent businessman in Central Province, George Grant, Dr. Joseph B. Danquo, Ernest J. and Edward Akufo-Addo, among others. UC played the following roles. 1. UC was the first modern political party to be formed, and its leadership advocated for constitutional reforms. These led to the attainment of self-rule in Gold Coast. 2. UC provided charismatic leadership under Kwame Nkrumah as a full-time general secretary in November 1947. He used his organizational and oratory power to attract the youth, civil servants, and this increased the pressure against Britain. 3. UC took part in the 1948 Feb riots, which were a turning point in the independence struggle. These riots saw many nationalists arrested because of boycotting British and Syrian goods. The killing of the leaders and arrest weakened the colonial rule. 4. The UC leadership intensified violence under British rule due to the harsh action of Governor Gerald Creasy. The Big Six, including Nkrumah, Danquo, and others, made the colonial government to lose popularity. 5. UC condemned and rejected the constitutional reforms of 1951. The constitution had loopholes of having many traditional chiefs as representatives in Parliament. The nationalists opposed the chiefs as they were collaborators. 6. The party adopted effective use of the press to mobilize and sensitize the masses. The UC used the Accra Evening News, established in 1948, to condemn the colonial atrocities of the British. 7. UG influenced the establishment of a revised constitution in 1954 under Sir Arden Clarke. This provided for the National Assembly with representatives voted by majority Ghanaians, hence increasing demand for independence. 8. The party under the dynamic rule of Kwame Nkrumah established many party branches throughout the country. It became a mass party and brought together all people. 9. The UG identified with the problems of the masses that included the scarcity of imported goods, inflation and swollen-shoot disease of cocoa. This move increased the popularity of the party to defeat colonialism. 10. UG acted as a mouthpiece of the people of Gold Coast. It complained at African history nationalism in Ghana. The rules of the Convention People's Party CPP. The party was formed on 12 June 1949 after Nkrumah stepping down as Secretary General of UG due to ideological differences. Other members of CPP included K.A. Chibadimore, Kwame Nwelbak, and Kojo Batia. The following are the rules of CPP. 1. The CPP adopted radical slogans such as self-government now and CQ. First, political independence and other things shall be added later. These energized the nationals for independence struggle. 2. The CPP intensively mobilized the natives against the British colonialism. The party tried to expose the evils of colonialism that made Ghana get independence in 1957. 3. The CPP provided a framework for consolidated unity. It discouraged the ethnic differences. The party opened gates for citizens, including the youth, hence boosting independence. 4. The CPP established a newspaper called Accra Evening News to spread anti-colonial propaganda. The articles written captured the emotions of ordinary people, hence opposing the British. 5. The CPP rejected the constitutional changes proposed Corsi of 1949 as being fake. This also made many Ghanaians oppose the 1951 constitution that failed to eliminate traditional chiefs used by the British. 6. The CPP used candidism and positive action against the British colonialism. It took part in the widespread strikes and riots, e.g. in 1950 the British schools shops were boycotted, cut the cocoa plantations of the British, hence reforms were effected. 7. CPP employed constitutional means of demanding for independence. The party demanded for reforms, and this increased African reproduction in the Letco, and in 1954 CPP had 79 out of 104 seats. 8. CPP participated in pre-independence elections of 1951, 1954 and 1956. In 1951, CPP won 34 out of 38 seats in Parliament, and 1956 71 out of 104 to form the first independent government for Gold Coast. 9. The party defeated favoritism and regionalism. All tribes and other political parties, such as the National Liberal Movement of the Assam, cooperated, leading to independence. 10. CPP opened up branches of the party across the country. The party sounded much in the same way in rural areas as in urban centres, e.g. in Accra, Tema, Kumasi, hence a broad-based party. 11. African history nationalism in Ghana. 13. CPP organized political values and composed slogans singing Nkrumah's names and titles, i.e. a man of destiny, deliverer of Ghana, leader of street boys. All these inspire people to work for independence. 14. CPP scrapped off the 10 years development plan of the colonial government, proposed in 1946, and reduced it to 5 years. This boosted the economic standard Ghana, hence quickening independence in 1957. 15. CPP changed the name Gold Coast to Ghana at independence in memory of the strong ancient Ghana Empire. This was a symbol of African personality that brought identity. 16. CPP led Gold Coast to independence on 6 March 1957 with Nkrumah as Prime Minister and later President. This led to the formation of the Black Africans government. Kwame Nkrumah. Nkrumah was born on September 21, 1909 in the southern region of Gold Coast. His father was Mr. M.Y. Covey Francis. He was a teacher by profession, but later became a lawyer while in the US after acquiring a master's degree. Nkrumah returned to Gold Coast in 1947 after spending 12 years in the diaspora. He embarked on political mobilization in the UG Party, where he was a Secretary General. Question 1. Examine the role of Kwame Nkrumah in the attainment of independence in Ghana. 2. To what extent was Nkrumah responsible for the decolonization of Ghana? The following are the roles of Nkrumah. 1. Nkrumah accepted the leadership in UG as Secretary General in Gold Coast in 1947. He used the position to popularize the need for independence, opened up party branches in various districts. 2. He made effective use of the press to spread anti-colonial propaganda in the country. He set up the Accra Evening News and the Cape Coast Daily Mail, written in local languages understood by the people. The press used the slogan independence. Now, 3. Nkrumah worked with the trade unions of teachers and railway employees to advocate for better conditions. He used these professionals to make them employ positive action like strikes and demonstrations against the unfair policies of the British. 4. Nkrumah formed a committee of the youth after 1948 riots, and this increased the youth membership to demand for independence. He also used the school leavers, desperately looking for jobs, to oppose the government for its unfair policies. That youth regarded Nkrumah as also chief of the Redeemer. 5. Nkrumah condemned the British colonialism and sensitized the masses against the African history nationalism in Ghana. 6. The arrest and imprisonment of Nkrumah by the colonial government boosted his radical campaign. He was arrested in 1948 with other members of Big Six and in 1950 for inciting workers. This turned Nkrumah into a hero and made him win 1951 elections. 7. Nkrumah formed the CPP party in 1949 after breaking away from ANC. The CPP addressed the aspirations of the people up to the remotest village with a slogan, self-independence now. 8. Nkrumah opposed the Kausi Constitution of October 1949 that proposed increased representation of traditional chiefs. The chiefs were to sing the colonial language, and this made him get more support for independence. 9. Nkrumah accepted to become leader of government businesses in 1951 after his release from prison. This made CPP to win 34 out of 38 seats in Aleko that led to his acquiring of the office of Prime Minister to initiate projects like Volta Dam project. Then, as a Prime Minister, social service delivery was improved, e.g. he extended the health sector to rural areas and provided UP to children below 12 years. Water and electricity too were provided to the local people. 11. Nkrumah defeated tribalism during the independence struggle by encouraging national unity. Nkrumah worked with all the ethnic-based parties such as Togoland, Progressive Party TPP, National Liberation Movement and LMF Sant among others. Nkrumah was visionary that made CPP get support. 12. Nkrumah cooperated with the colonial authorities under Governor Sir Charles Arden Clark. He established a mutual trust with the governor and worked on the policy of independence from the British. 13. Nkrumah led the CPP to participate in the 1954 and 1956 pre-independence elections. Nkrumah's party won overwhelmingly, i.e. in 1954, CPP got 79 out of 104 seats and 71 in 1956, creating room for leading the country at independence in 1957. 14. Nkrumah under CPP received the instruments of power at independence in 1957 from the British. The new nation adopted the name Ghana in memory of the ancient empire, and Nkrumah became the first president. Achievement of Nkrumah and the CPP government in 1951 and 1966. Nkrumah and CPP assumed the arms of an internally self-governing Gold Coast in 1951 when there was rising prices of cocoa, and Nkrumah therefore embarked on development projects as below. 1. The government of Nkrumah proclaimed a 5-year development plan of £120 million. This replaced the 10-year programme of Governor Alan Burns in 1946. This money was used to import capital equipment, expert personnel and train local people to provide services to the people. African history nationalism in Ghana. 3. The communication sector was also developed by Nkrumah. The CPP government modernized radio and television services to increase education, entertainment and information. The telephone and wireless telegraphy systems were built. Automatic communication services were greatly improved in the urban centers. 4. The CPP government initiated the construction of the hydroelectric power dam at Volta River. The dam was aimed at promoting industrialization, and it was commissioned in 1961 and it began functioning in 1966 January before the overthrow of Nkrumah. The dam also generated electricity to solve the domestic needs of the people, and it was exported to countries like Benin and Togo to increase revenue. 5. Nkrumah promoted industrial development in Ghana compared to the colonial government. The black government ensured the setting up of export promotion industries targeting market in England. Local industries were given incentives like tax exemptions majorly on imported capital equipment. The Nkrumah government also partnered with manufacturing centres to produce essentials like safety matches and sugar. 6. CPP government promoted the agricultural sector in Ghana. The agricultural sector was diversified to reduce reliance on cocoa and bring new crops like maize, yams, tea, nuts, coffee, among others. Also, state farms were set up to encourage livestock farming, poultry, and teaching of agricultural science was emphasized in universities. 7. Nkrumah and the CPP government fought the swollen shoot diseases that affected the cocoa sector. There was a nationwide campaign against cocoa disease. Trees were cut and farmers given better varieties. The livelihood of farmers was greatly improved through the marketing boards established that offered financial assistance. 8. Nkrumah CPP government promoted the welfare of the Ghanaians. That government embarked on the housing scheme to solve accommodation shortage created by massive industrialization. The Ministry of Housing was established that set up houses in Accra, Takoradi and Kumasi, and these were rented at low cost, and people were also encouraged to buy houses slowly through the savings. 9. Reforms in education were also undertaken by the CPP government. By 1961, the Nkrumah government became the first African country to start the universal primary education UP that made all children below 12 years to attend. It was later extended to secondary and tertiary levels, and textbooks were provided to improve quality. The Ghana Education Trust GET was set up to build and manage the schools. Scholarships were also given to students to study from abroad. 10. Health services were greatly improved upon by the Nkrumah government. Hospitals were established both in rural and urban centres. Regional hospitals were built. The Sekondi Takoradi Hospital clinics were set up to bring services closer to the rural people. A medical school was set up in Accra, and many nursing schools were set up in the entire country to address the problems of medical personnel. African history, nationalism in Ghana. Education. The central government provided operational grants for local council development projects. 12. The CPP government Africanized the civil service in Ghana. From the time Nkrumah joined active government leadership in 1951, the plan was launched to include the natives in the management of country affairs. The Ghanaians were encouraged to take up education in order to manage the country affairs after the departure of the colonialists. 13. Nkrumah introduced constitutional reforms for Ghana from 1953. The committee to carry out political mapping for Ghana was headed by a Ghanaian called Van Leer to demarcate the constituencies of the country. Elective posts were highlighted under universal adult suffrage. 14. The government defeated regionalism in Ghana. All the competing political parties, based on ethnic lines, were made to focus on nation building, e.g. the Muslim Party Association, Ghana Congress Party, Togo Congress, the National Liberation Movement, led by the chief opposition leader Kofi Bizia. 15. Nkrumah condemned and fought neo-colonialism. Nkrumah regarded neo-colonialism as the worst stage of imperialism, and he blocked ties with the British government. Nkrumah also called upon all African independent governments to dissociate from the former colonial masters, discourage the Western balkanization of Africa, divisionism. 16. Nkrumah promoted the culture of Ghana. There was cultural rejuvenation through the promotion of dance, music, art and literature. Ghana Ensemble promoted the local music and dance abroad. Games and sports were given priority, and Ghana was crowned the champion of boxing in the Commonwealth in 1963. Also took part in continental football. 17. CPP government increased mineral exploitation in Ghana. Ghana exploited the gold and aluminium effectively, and this boosted economic development, increased industrialization, and increased the balance of payment through mineral export. Failures of Nkrumah/downfall. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah and the CPP government lasted up to 1966. Despite the numerous achievements of Nkrumah, the country was dominated by many weaknesses that led to the February 24, 1966 coup organized by Colonel Emmanuel Kosi Katoka, Colonel A. Okran, Major Afifa and the Police Commissioner Holly. Nkrumah was overthrown while away to Hanoi, Vietnam on an international peace mission. The following were the weaknesses of Nkrumah. 1. The change in the personality of Nkrumah was a major weakness. He turned from a selfless, humble and Osajifo redeemer to a power-hungry politician, become intolerant and proud that made his bootlickers henchmen to become his enemies. Hence downfall. 2. African history, nationalism in Ghana. Units instead of the elections the Ghanaians waited for and the constituencies were created to the surprise of the people. 3. Nkrumah used the powers of the presidency to interfere with the judiciary. In 1962, Nkrumah survived an assassination, and he ordered for the arrest of the chief opposition leader Adamayo as the chief suspect, but later acquitted due to lack of evidence. Nkrumah ordered for the dismissal of the chief justice and many judges. In 1964, organized a referendum to make Ghanaians decide and make the country a one-party state. 4. The dictatorial and tyrannical rule of Nkrumah was a major weakness. He had a tight spy network and past preventive detention acts. His powers became unquestionable and arrested numerous opposition leaders like J.B. Dankwa, Adamayo and Kofi Bizier. Others were forced to go to exile, hence became unpopular. 5. Nkrumah and the CPP government plunged the country into financial bankruptcy. The government became insolvent due to the extravagant and lavish life of Nkrumah. Corruption and embezzlement became eminent in the country. The large number of cabinet ministers was ever on foreign missions, leading to the downfall of Nkrumah in 1966. 6. The CPP government failed to address the scarcity of essential goods. These included sugar, drugs, milk and paraffin, among others. The country adopted unrealistic policies of controlling imports that resulted into scarcity. This was accompanied by lack of employment in urban areas, since the government became unpopular. 7. The Nkrumah government interfered with the police department. The police had attempted to get involved in the abortive coups against Nkrumah, therefore many of them were terminated and others arrested. These police officers dismissed by the government joined the coup plotters to stage the exit of Nkrumah. 8. Failure of the CPP government to address the grievances of the army led to the downfall of Nkrumah. The army was divided after the creation of the President's Brigade. This was well facilitated at the expense of the National Army. Worst of all, Nkrumah opened a military academy and recruited CPP supporters. The 1965 decree led to the dismissal of the Chief of Staff, i.e. General Otto, and his Deputy Lieutenant Nkrumah, which undermined the government. 9. Nkrumah's proposal to send the army in southern Rhodesia to fight the UDI